my experience with sort of narrative therapy and the need
Yeah.
counseling that she's offering, and just helping families change the stories that lead to the stress. So if I believe that my child is doing something on purpose, then my reaction to that is very different than if I recognize it as a limitation that might be beyond their control.
Mhm. Because it isn't something we're trying to do. I had to also explain it to my husband. I'm like, honey, it's not that I don't want to help you clean the house. It's that sometimes my body says I'm tired and all I see is the couch.
Hmm.
So it can be very stressful for people without ADHD to understand people with ADHD.
Yeah,
Because you're just sitting there and going, well, how is it that you can't focus on your math homework, but you can write a story for 5 hours?
right, exactly.
And you're saying, I don't know.
Yes, someone gave me a really great analogy. It was a parent, and I think it was their therapist or their counselor who'd given it to them. He said, imagine that you work in like the greatest science lab in the world, and you have like the top scientists working there, but like the lab manager's always out.
Hmm.
What would they do? Would they work? Well, no, of course not. They'd like kind of da 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 da. But as soon as the manager comes back in, they'd all get right to work and work really focused and do the best work possible. And then he'd leave again, and they're like, do, 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 do. So, it's so often the case that when they're doing the thing that they love, they're so focused and they can go for hours and you have to remind them to eat. But then if it's something that doesn't grab them, then it feels like pulling teeth, which is why our model is a strengths-based approach, which is to take the stuff that they're already good at and that they like doing and bring it into the areas they feel challenged so that it's engaging and fun. Our philosophy is very much that happy kids do well in school. Our job is to help kids remember that learning is fun and to teach that to them.
Hmm. I really like that because a lot of school is very, as they call left brain, I guess, for people that sit straight in the chair and take notes and do the tests and learn the facts, and some people just are not good at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm glad that your company is working for something bigger, something stronger, because if I would have had that in school, boy, would have I done better. I had it a bit, but my parents ended up splitting up, and then all of a sudden my schoolwork and everything about it went down, 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 because I lost that aspect. I lost the music notes, I lost the movement, I lost the, little rhymes that she would do, and when I lost that, I became the class clown and started
Mm.
acting out. And I had one teacher, he was a bit of a. He sounded like an auctioneer in math
Nice.
class. So you try to listen, but you really couldn't.
Mm.
I didn't even know one word from another. Some of them mixed, and yeah, that was the end of that. I really
Yeah,
didn't understand after that, and so anything math went in one ear and out the other.
of course.
So my husband reminded me you should ask about her vision for her company because it's really, really good.
So my long-term vision is we want to have centers all across North America. And these centers would be hubs. So they would be places where families could come and get all the services they need in one place, ADHD specific. So there would be pediatricians there who know ADHD backwards and forwards, and psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors, and there would be different treatment methods. So there'd be massage therapists there, and there'd be bioneurofeedback centers, and pretty much any different treatments you can imagine would be available. There would be, one-on-one tutoring is our model in students' homes, but there would be a center downstairs where kids could come and work on their homework while their parents are in, with their therapist or whatever, or, that they could come and hang out, and there'd be, a youth center there where all the kids could come and relate to one another. We're launching our first summer camp this year. We're going to do a day camp, again, exclusively for kids with ADHD. And I'm so excited because it'll be really interesting to get about 15 of these kids in a room together. We're going to have a really high adult ratio. So we're going to have about one adult for every 2 to 3 students. And it will be so interesting to see what evolves from that, because often you avoid putting these kids in a room together. But I hypothesized that with the right structure and the right adults, we could have some magic happen. So I want to create more opportunities for that.
That's really awesome as well. It also helps kids go, aha, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. I had a neat experience of working with a young man a little while ago who had Asperger's and also ADHD, and he was really struggling socially. And his mom found this really great group of young boys with Asperger's who, like, every weekend there's something to do with the group. And so you can kind of drop in when you want, but it was amazing. And his response to that was so strong, this feeling of, like, I'm not alone. There's other people like me dealing with the same challenges I'm dealing with. And, you know, and he was only in grade 7 when they started taking him, but his experience of it was so rich, and it really, I found, helped him change his own perspective of the way he struggles and the way he's challenged, but also the strengths he has. To look and go, hey, you're really good at that. Hey, I'm really good at that. And I think that that's something I want to create an opportunity. And if the summer camp goes well, we'll probably be looking at building something similar for our guys with ADHD to come and hang out with each other and goof off and sort of do things in a way, and then probably have some adults around who can start teaching the parents as well different strategies and social management and, you know, how to manage them in crowded environments and preload them and do all those things that sometimes don't always come as a natural thing for parents.
Yeah, they have this program my husband used to volunteer at. It was called Rainbows, and it was for people that were divorced or they'd lost someone or something. So it was kind of similar, the way you're describing it, to that, because then they have this extra support where, let's say, every other Tuesday the parent goes to their class, the kid will go to their class for strategies, and then maybe they meet up at the end, which would be very beneficial.
Totally.
You have a lot of great ideas. I'm pretty impressed. How do you work with comorbid disorders?
We do fairly frequently. It's, again, I so often find that, especially when it comes to behavioral things, it's often just an evolution of the ADHD itself. You know, as an example, I worked with a young man who was having anxiety issues. He was having panic attacks. And the family discussed putting him on medication. And I said, give it to me for 3 months. So we just started working with him. I said, give me 3 months. And if in 3 months he's still struggling, go with the meds. But I just, you know, I have no problem with medication. I think they're an amazing tool. I think it's something we jump onto quickly a lot of the time, and we don't always know what the effects are going to be. Mm-hmm. And then we're dealing with more issues than we were before rather than less. And so I did. And for 3 months I worked with him, and at the end of 3 months he wasn't having panic attacks anymore. And all of a sudden something that had been this big, scary thing was very manageable for him. And it really just came down to his panic attacks always happened around test taking, and what we found was that I just sort of explored with him and got really curious with him one day and was like, so what about tests? Like, what's so bad? What's the worst thing that could happen? And as we discovered, as we just sort of went down the rabbit hole, as I call it, was that he at some point had developed a confusion, probably when he was quite young, that if he didn't know the answer, he was going to fail the test, which would result in failing his grade, which would result in never going to university, which would result in dying alone in a box of street. It took us about 45 minutes to get there. But when he said it, he was like, well, that's a bit extreme. And I was like, yeah, what do you think about that? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, have you ever known someone who didn't know the answer to a math question and didn't die alone in a box in the streets? And he was like, well, yeah, of course. It seems silly. And as we started to backtrack him out of it, we recognized that the confusion was gone. He had resolved it. And then moving forward from that, it just wasn't an issue anymore. He just didn't have to worry about it. And he just could. And then we started taking a lot of ownership around his test-taking skills and abilities and really just building that up. And it got to the point where at the end of the year, it was so cool when I asked him, you know, what do you think changed the most this year? His response was, he goes, when I don't know the answer on a test anymore, I'm okay with it. He goes, it means I either didn't study hard enough. He goes, and sometimes I do choose to play video games instead of studying for my test, which means if I don't know the answers, that's on me. And sometimes I just recognize, well, I didn't know that. I didn't learn that next time. And it was just such a different shift from the kid who was like, oh my God, I don't know. And then he's like hyperventilating. So it was pretty amazing. So that's how we sort of deal. That's my approach generally to behavioral stuff. And, we try and work with it as much as we can. And, if it's a social issue, we implement social programming. We have a program called the Turtle Program that actually evolved from something I read in university and has been built on, that really works on anxiety and anger and managing emotions more effectively. Mm-hmm. In terms of other things like dyslexia or any of the other kind of standard learning disabilities that come comorbid so often, we just do what we need to do. It's the same process. So if it's something specific like dyslexia, I'll match them up with a tutor that has a background in that and knows how to deal with that from a different perspective. And then it's the same thing. You just figure out how do they learn. I mean, any of these so-called learning disabilities can often just be looked at different processing. And so we find with dyslexic kids, when you involve texture in their learning, all of a sudden the information goes in differently. It's a processing issue in the visual processing. So if we can get them to process it kinesthetically or in an auditory way, often we can resolve the issue.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It's really interesting because a lot of people, when they think about the comorbid stuff, it almost gives them a headache. But, once you get it down to a science, once you get the right person matched with the right person, so to speak, it becomes almost like an easy breeze going across the ocean. So, I mean, a lot of parents, they breathe a sigh of relief because the kid's going, I finally have someone that gets me. I finally am able to move forward.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and that's really the key that I find. I evaluate my tutors based on their ability to make their sessions fun for the students, based on how engaged the student is and how much the student is looking forward to their next session. Because that was the thing that really stood out for me when I was doing the tutoring myself, was the parents kept saying, like, we just can't believe that, Johnny's just so excited for his tutoring sessions. He shows up like as soon as the bell rings, he is out the door, backpack in hand, ready, and he is so excited for his tutor to get there. And it's such a relief for parents because it's one less fight they have to have every day. And I find that in that way, the student's so open to learning with their tutor because they're like, all right, this is a person who's got my best interest at hand. They want me to do well, but they're going to make it fun for me. And I'm excited. Like, what are they going to bring today? What games are we going to play today? And in that way, they're so much more open to the information that we're trying to teach.
So what suggestions would you give for, let's say, a junior high student that absolutely hates learning and just doesn't want to go to school? And
I would say find something you're passionate about and figure out how it relates. So as an example, I'm working with a grade 8 student right now who loves video games, and he wants to be a video game designer and programmer, but writing and math are his two big limitations. And so recently we helped him connect that programming video games is all about math. It's all physics. You're basically programming physics. And that really turned a corner for him. He started going, oh, really? And I'm going to have to know this stuff to do the job I want to do. All of a sudden math became a lot more interesting. And then in terms of writing, we really helped him connect. I said, well, let's say you have this really brilliant idea for a project you want to do. How are you going to propose that to your boss if you can't write it? And he was like, oh, all of a sudden writing got easier, and writing was something he was willing to push on more. So I say, like, figure out the thing that you want to do and figure out how what you're doing right now in school relates to that. Even if it's not directly. I just started with a new student yesterday who, is really involved in hockey and loves hockey and wants to go to this hockey camp. Well, he can't go if he has to go to summer school. So he needs to pull his marks up, and that's where the focus will come from. Is like, it's just every day connecting. How does doing my homework today get me to that hockey game?
Yeah, because my brother, he had a lot of trouble in school too, because he at about grade 4 was about at a 17-year-old reading level, And so all the stuff that they were doing was monotonous and boring, and he couldn't handle it. And he's just sitting there going, I hate this, I hate school, I hate doing this. And the teachers would get very upset with him because he would be able to lay his head down on a desk and listen to them and get 98s on tests, but he would not, for the life of him, go and pick up the homework and actually do it.
Right.
Because they thought the homework was the key to all success.
Right.
And I'm like, oh boy, if you guys would only know.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's the challenge, is that the educational system is rigid, and it's the system that's rigid. And I found that working in the school system really helped me when I was in SEA to be compassionate with teachers and understand that they're so overwhelmed and they're working in a broken system, and you can't fix a broken system from the bottom of the system, and that I meet so many teachers who are such great teachers and they just don't know what to do. They've got 32 kids in their class. 2 of them have ADHD. 1 has autism. 3 have AIDS. 3 are, English as a second language. 2 have dyslexia. You're dealing with another with an anxiety issue. 2 has parents in the middle of a divorce, and it's so challenging for them. And so, I was reading a statistic the other day that was saying that 3 in 4 children have a learning disability. And I thought to myself, doesn't that speak more to the system than it does to the children? You've got 3 out of 4 kids are struggling to learn in school. Doesn't that mean we're doing it wrong?
Yeah.
Failing them at that point, and that's not the fault of the teacher, it's the fault of the system. Which is why ultimately as I build my company and I get into doing more workshops, I want to work more on advocacy and helping change the system so it can be better for all students, not just mine.
Exactly. Because it is a very flawed system. And my brother, he does not have ADHD at all. It's just that the system is, like you said, very, very rigid. They don't think about the different types of learning because there are many different types. And like my mom said, as she's teaching in university, she's finding more and more the way that you teach the student is going to hit the student better. Some days she does audio. In one of her classes, she's going to be building a quilt.
Cool.
Which is kind of neat. And YouTube videos, she does all sorts of things. And it's all about nursing. And she said she would never have been able to figure it out had she not have had me as her first pupil.
Yeah, that's why I always tribute my sister, too, and helping me recognize that everybody just does it a little differently.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess we better wrap up. Is there anything you would like to say to the parents out there that are struggling with their lovely children that might help them along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say to go back to the narrative therapy thing, reframe the story, recognize that what's going on for them has to do with the way their brains are working, and there isn't a lot that they can necessarily do about it. That doesn't mean that we can't give them tools to help them resolve the conflict, to help them resolve the challenges they're being faced. And I think to recognize that just because your child isn't finding success in this system doesn't mean that they can't find success. You just got to go out and help them find the places where they do excel and draw attention to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this today.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate it. Anyway, I guess we'll sign off for now, and hopefully everybody's learned from your wonderful experiences.